Hi everybody, so this is task 3 and this is our final critique for the class. So it's really amazing that how far we've come, and I hope you really maybe check out your sketches from week 1 and just see how your character developed. I think it's always really interesting to see that. Um, okay, so we're just going to spend just a few moments here seeing if there's anything that we can work on for our Saturday deadline. Um, as always, if you do not submit the final submission, I'll automatically just take probably this draft to grade. But if you can work on it a little bit more and submit it to the final submission area, that is typically, or that is will then where I will grade your milestone 5 um, submission. So just to let you know, and I try to post grades Sunday. So I try to do it like the day after the class closes. So any work that you want included in the final submission area, you do want to make sure to get in by that Saturday deadline. Um, okay, so we're going to get started. I think we'll just go in the order that people have submitted them. Okay, Nick. Yeah, those tears, I think they're okay. You could, they're not really, I don't think they're a really big deal. I probably think they probably could be. Um, I don't, again, in design, when you get to a certain point in a design where, let me just try to get this, I have to just fit it right in there. When you get to a certain point in your design, where you have all of the major kind of parts included, sometimes what you like to do is go back and see if there's anything that you can actually is not necessarily that important for the strength of your character design, because that actually can strengthen a design, when you kind of reduce the amount of detail. So I find that I do that all the time in a design or an art piece where I'm working and I put a lot more than I need, and then I find as a final phase I take things out. And that's what I was suggesting here, is that it just doesn't seem like this is that necessary. Was this part of your original photograph? I don't remember here. Let's just see if we can kind of. You mentioned that you weren't able to get it out. Let's just see what's happening with that. So there it is. Let me just sort of move it. Oh, these are all linked. Hold on a second. So that's what happened here. I unlinked the layer so I could pull the photograph. And what happened is in the original photograph, it looks like you deleted some instead of hiding on the layer mask when you wanted to create the holes. So in future, when you, and this is something I would maybe suggest working on, bring back your original photograph that you used for the fries, and then when you want to, um, when you want to delete something, then you're going to hide it on the mask. So instead of actually erasing it, that's what we're talking about when we talk about non-destructive editing. Um, so yeah, let me just get back to our layers. And so that's how you'd be able to fix that. Same thing with your, I remember your burgers. Remember I talked about that, how you've got this kind of like ragged line there, which is fairly obvious. Sometimes, when you have a selection, really, when we're doing these selections with layer masks or any type of selection where you're deleting part or hiding part of a photograph, to create something new like this, these edges, sometimes if they blend into a background, um, you may not have to really smooth them out that much. It depends upon what's behind it. In this case, because it's got such a clean red background, it is very obvious that this is not a clean selection. So I noticed that this did not have a layer mask. So you just want to go back in here and fix that, um, by doing what you would do here. Can you see here there's no layer mask? So bring that hamburger back, add a layer mask, you know, based on what we did in week 5. And that way you'll be able to smooth that out really nicely. So those are the two main things here that I think I would work on, um, is to just, tweak your layer masks a little bit and Yeah. So yeah, good job. And this technical part, it does seem really kind of boring at some point, but honestly, the layer masks, when you leave this class, if you go somewhere, if you're working for somebody in Photoshop, knowing layer masks will be the one, and probably in adjustment layers, but layer masks for sure will be the one thing that everybody will be very, um, will expect you to do and also be impressed that you can do. Because layer masks are sort of one of those things that kind of change you from being somebody who's a novice Photoshop person if you don't use layer masks, if you use the eraser tool, to somebody who is like you could say an educated Photoshop person, whether you've self-educated or taken a class, is just knowing the layer masks. It's amazing how I think that's such a big a big kind of defining line. So the more practice you get in them, and I'd recommend that for everybody in the class, keep practicing your layer mask after you have left this class. Every once in a while, get a photograph and add a layer mask so you keep your skills fresh. Okay, Darla, yes, so much better with the color. I really like this color palette now. I think it's very suitable for your design. And, as a sort of a general comment, what I have noticed kind of over the years personally and also working with students, that when you get a good color palette, like by good color palette, that you typically just means one that is a reduced color palette in the sense that you have deliberately chosen like a couple of hues, in your case like yellow and blue, and some kind of silver and a little bit of maybe some organic color here, but it's pretty reduced, where there's a lot of unity in terms of matching colors in different parts of the design. You will automatically get a strong design. It just happens naturally. It's what we call when I remember back when I was studying design at the very beginning, and even for several years, I really didn't understand the idea of unity. I mean, I would do it in my work automatically because I think we have a tendency to want to unify things. I mean, it's why when we get dressed in the morning, sometimes we'll try to match our clothes together, or shoes, or maybe less so today, but where you try to maybe in your living room, you might try to put together a color scheme. It's the same exact principle in design. I mean, it just looks better. And you can have other things that are maybe not so great in a design, but the color harmony is going to make it look really polished. So I'm glad you were able to do that, and just keep that in mind. In any type of design work you do, doesn't just have to be a Photoshop collage. This idea of really deliberately working with color really, really, really helps. Um, I only have just a few, now that you have that worked out, now I have just a few additional things. Oh, and I like your text. Okay, so the shadow, I like the shadow so much better. Something that you can do with the shadow is, um, let's see if we can, so what you want to do is kind of have the shadow looking as sort of natural as possible. And typically what would be happening here is the shadow would be kind of like, let's see if I can find somebody who's got a good example here to show you. Let's see, hold on, I'm going to open up Nix again. So here is Nick's design. So you can see that what the shadow is doing here. So you see how it touches the feet, and then it kind of goes away from the figure. That's just how shadows are. If you look at a shadow either inside your home, like the legs of a chair, or if you're standing somewhere and you look at the shadow coming away from you, it's going to be doing something similar to that, where it starts at your feet, and it's about approximately the same size, might widen as it goes back. So with yours here, let's go back in here. So let's just start by moving it over a little bit. You can see I have it selected. I have this shadow selected here, the layer. Let's just kind of move it over. I'm just going to see where it ends. I'm going to sort of put it right about here. That's where you would see it starting, and I'm going to just line it up there. And then now we're going to kind of do some warping on it. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but one way is to go up to the Edit menu, go to Transform, and go to Warp right in here. There's different types of transforming, and I don't know, Warp can give you a lot of options here to move everything around. It's pretty flexible. So we can start by just moving this corner in a little bit so that it kind of matches up in here. You see that? And you just might like the way it is looks there, but you can sort of play around with it in different ways, depending upon how you want it to move. You can kind of really just sort of adjust it um, in a way like where you want it to be on the background, how you want it to relate to the other elements. So that, uh, so that's what you can do. You can see it's like completely flexible. You don't want to get it too, you want to kind of keep it somewhat natural as it would fall on the paper. But so you can see what that might do. Maybe it could go over a little bit more to the left. Okay, so uh, okay, so the other thing I might do is I noticed that so you've got like this kind of like flat tire here, which I think is really cool. But there is a sense that why is it pressed there? Like it seems like it's sitting on something that was normal, that was how it was to begin with, like on the, let's find the tire body here. So this is how it was in the original photo, which is that, yeah, it was on the ground. So, or a table or, something like that. So in a way, I think because you've got this, it's not sitting on anything right here because it's sort of floating in front of this paper background. So it seems like it really wants to have something underneath it. So let me go back to this photograph and see if you could use that. Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's got a lot going around it. So I'm going to go back to Nix again. Here we have Nix. So you could, have something like this, like something really simple, linear that you put underneath it that it sits on, you know, um, and thinking about your color harmony, like maybe it would be like silver or maybe brown, like this color, you know, something just simple. Maybe it would just kind of, maybe it could fill this whole space or maybe just a little platform that he could sit on. So I would do that. Those are really the main things. And then the other thing I may do is just play a little bit with the character in terms of the movement. Right now, the character seems like it's a little bit stiff, like it's just sort of standing there. And of course, characters would do that; they would just stand still. So that's maybe a normal way that it would look. But in the case of this particular assignment, I find that the character it's very helpful to start making some more movement with your character, so that your character looks like um, it's going somewhere, or it's got its head tilted to the side, maybe its wings are kind of doing different things, just so that because we're taking all these random objects and we're putting them together, and the more that you kind of like make it appear that it's alive, the more your objects are going to appear like they are living, like it's a living character. So you can just have fun with that. I really love doing that. I kind of can spend hours and hours just sort of playing around with it, but just kind of like tilting maybe you could tilt the eyes and the mouth, so it looks like the head is tilted, just kind of experiment a little bit. Okay, so that's what you could work with. Daniel, yeah, I like all these changes. They look really good. Um, and just sort of creates, I think, a stronger look to your design. Everything just seems really nicely placed now. So I think you're pretty much done. The only thing that I might suggest at this point is with your so I opened up the character panel here, right here, which is just one of the panels you can open up from the Windows menu. And when you open it, and you may already know, let me just move this over here, and you select your text, you just kind of click and select the layer. You can make all kinds of changes directly from this character panel. For example, the color. The color right here is black or a very dark color. And I would be inclined to take, even though I think it's not a bad choice, it has a little bit of a default feeling. What color should I do? I'll use a black. Um, Maybe I think you mentioned a copper color. Yeah, I think there's a little hint of that. Maybe you just want to play that up a little bit. But what you can do directly from here, which I like to do, is I click directly in the color panel and it opens it up. And then, so, here's our color picker. And instead of picking something here, what you can actually do is go over to your design. Can you see how when I went over the design, it automatically turned to an eyedropper? And you can literally click on any color in any of the layers here, and it'll automatically read it and change your color. And so I love doing this because I can kind of go through and match something directly. Like I don't have to invent a color to match. It's really right there in my design. You can kind of go through and just say, hey, what looks best? You can literally just play with all of these colors. So much fun. You can see I really like doing that. Um, and I would just probably go with something maybe a little bit that shows the hue a little bit more, the underlying hue so that you get like uh, a what am I looking for? Like a stronger impression of the color. I think that's all I'd really suggest at this point. Everything that Oh, yeah. So I just pulled your PSD from task 2 just because I'm doing the critique today. This is the final critique, and I thought, oh, hey, we should really include your work so that it can give you a little bit more, verbal feedback on your character that maybe some things you could work on for Saturday. And some of this is going to probably be a little bit of a repeat of the written text, the written comments that I gave you in task 2, but hopefully it'll be helpful. Um, so overall, I think I think all of the major steps here are done in the design in terms of, I think it meets the requirements, which is good. I think there's a way that you could probably really polish this up a little bit more, and so I'm going to give you some suggestions here for how to do that. Um, First thing I talked a little bit about in relation to your design is the layer masks. I think you have had overall the layer masks in general look good. I think it's these straws that were always causing you a lot of problems here. And so I'm going to just disable the layer mask here. And so you can see what happens when I disable the layer mask is that you're ending up with, what you tried to do here is clean up the layer mask by just destroying some of the background, which is something you want to avoid doing. Rather than that, what you wanted to do is to hide things directly on the layer mask. And I mentioned this I maybe mentioned this a few weeks ago. One of the issues is problematic with this photograph is that it's through no fault of your own, this was a really difficult selection to make. Because if you look at, this selection that you're trying to do this straw right here, there's a lot of white in it that's actually the same color as the background. And Photoshop doesn't know how to read that because it just reads it as the same. So when you try to mask it, it's going to be trying to select probably a lot of the white, and then you don't end up with a clean selection. So how do you resolve that? The way you resolve that is actually just changing this photograph to a straw that has a more clear definition between the background, more contrast. And if you go to Google Images, I think you'll probably be able to find a cute little straw you could work with. I would just do a little searching for it, and then do one layer mask, and it looks like you have all of the same. You can just repeat that layer and use it for your arms and your legs, and just do the layer mask once. So I think it's a good investment of your time to do that for the overall character. I love the feet. I think they look really good. Now your background, I think, is still maybe a touch strong for your character. And why is that? It's because there's a lot of warm colors in the background, and warm colors. I don't know if you've taken color theory yet, but if you have, maybe you'll remember that warm colors advance and cool colors recede, and saturated colors advance and desaturated colors recede. And so what that means is because your particular character, the elements of your character are kind of cool and desaturated, they're being overpowered by the background. Okay, so how can you fix that? Well, you could experiment with a different background, which I always encourage folks to do just because it's good to experiment with different backgrounds, but you could also work with adjustment layers on this layer. So you could go to hue and saturation, and this is where you just need to kind of experiment to see what you like and if something's going to work. I'm just going to clip this layer here. So you could start by maybe desaturating it. You can really desaturate something all the way down till either you have a hint of color. If you have a hint of color, let's go a little higher here. I might be inclined to turn this into a cool color in the background. Cool colors being like blues, and again, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so there's some cool colors. Now, the cool colors are a lot more saturated. I kind of like, there's some green in your can. your garbage can, which I love that green. It's like a reflection. So you could sort of consider maybe matching it to the background in some way, like picking up that green. But it's still too, but can you see something like that maybe is something that would, I think, start to really work in your design? Um, I don't know what else you could do here. You could, I mean, it's about experimenting. What about making it a little darker so that your character really pops? Or what about lighter? Does that work? So I would be just doing what you're doing here is just, you know, so I don't like that. It looks too faded, but so you can experiment. I don't know if that's quite the right solution. Um, but it's about just spending some time with I kind of maybe look at like it a little bit more like that. Spending some time with your character, uh, playing with it, seeing what ends up working. Um, I think those are the main things. Hmm, I think I had one more thing to mention, maybe. Oh yeah, your cast shadow. So you're using drop shadows for your cast shadows, which drop shadows can work really well with a lot of things. Like they work really well with text, if you just need to have a little bit of a shadow. But with our character design, I think you need to kind of really be a little bit more intentional about it in terms of creating one big shape. Like you've seen me work on the other students in this critique with their shadows or comment on it, and they were all created probably by using the method that was covered in Task 2, Milestone 4. It's a really good little video in there on how to create a cast shadow, just with the elements that you have here. So it's a great technique to learn, and you could do a really cool cast shadow that way, and I think that would really be a tremendous asset to your design. I think your text looks really cute. I like it a lot. Really works with your design, and the color I think works really well too with the silver here. So that's a really nice choice, and I would just leave that. Okay, well, I hope that's helped. I think that's it, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this class, and I probably won't be talking to you again. So have a terrific end of the session, and I hope you find what we've learned in this class useful to what you're doing in your future classes and work projects.